Oh, that's funny. Good. Well, welcome everyone. We're still on our body series, and today we're talking about where spirit meets trauma work. So we know that, I'm sure if you're out there listening to any kind of social media, any kind of news at all, you've heard about trauma. And when I started hearing about it, I thought, well, do I have it? How would I know if I have it? You know, that kind of thing. So I'm just going to read a few little things so we all are on the same page with trauma. So many people carry unresolved emotional and physical experiences that impact their well-being, their life, their relationships. And that happens, their trauma happens when there's an overwhelming event, usually in their childhood or sometime in their life, that exceeds their ability to cope. I have heard where it is often, even when a child moves into some kind of way of protecting themselves from something or is emotionally disruptive and is protecting themselves, that could even be trauma. So trauma leaves imprints on our nervous system, and it affects how we think, feel, and respond in the world. And a lot of the time it causes depression, abuse of yourself, abuse of others, anxiety, stress. And what happens is the nervous system, I'm sure we've all heard this too, it's the fight, flight, freeze. And now there's a new one, right? Fight, flight.
Fawn. There's fawn and flop.
Yeah, fawn, flop. So these are ways that you react to your present situation, and your nervous system gets stuck in overdrive. So you're used to using one of those ways to get through a stressful moment or a stressful life. And a lot of the time now, therapy and healing is about calming the nervous system and using techniques like deep breathing, grounding exercises, that kind of thing. And it brings you back to the present, restores your energy, restores your balance. And I think it allows you to be who you truly are without all these protections and masks and coping mechanisms that we put in place. So I'd like to welcome our very special guest, Cat Gelinas. She is one of those people. The minute I met her, I was like, oh my gosh, she has to be on the podcast. I read on her every word. We are in some groups together. And she's one of those people that it's just wisdom that comes out of her mouth. And when I first met her, I thought she was about 25 because she's a beautiful woman. And I don't think she's that young, but I just kept thinking, how are you so wise? So she is here to give us a lot of inspiration and a lot of her heart. And what she does for a living is healing and helping people heal their own trauma. And she's a practitioner, and she's been a gifted practitioner in emotional healing since 2017. And she brings a powerful synthesis of healing techniques that she addresses trauma, healthy ego development, and subconscious release. Her approach is grounded in A Course in Miracles. So that's why we love her even more. And I'm just really happy to have you here, Kat. I'm really happy to introduce you to some of the Lemonettes you haven't met yet. And because Morgan and I have talked about you, and I know Drusilla knows you as well. And we rave about you here. And so I am just really happy to have you on the podcast and share with us what you do for a living and how you help people.
Thank you so much. I'm also honored to meet the Five Lemonettes. I have listened to a number of your podcasts, and as you guys share your wisdom, I'm like, oh, this is so good. This is great. Like all these insights. And so, yeah, I've been professionally working as a trauma resolution practitioner since 2017. I used to work in SAT prep and then software engineering, but oddly enough, those two former careers, they actually play into being a practitioner, because the human nervous system, the landscape of what it is to be human, actually is an engineered consciousness that you can find and expand relief in very predictable ways. It's like an art and a science at the same time. And it comes into play, different strategies. So yeah, I help people, mostly people who come and they're feeling stuck, getting triggered, or in some sort of painful pattern that they can't seem to get free of. And they want to expand, they want to grow in their lives, and they don't know how. They've been doing the thing where they try to do their way forward, take a lot of action, and they know that there's something more. So usually it's but through word of mouth that someone refers me, and then we have a session. And it's amazing how much emotions take up a lot of bandwidth, energy, and how safe you feel in the world and your body. And when you loosen and you can create safety within, all this energy gets freed up to then go do whatever you want to do. So that's what I do for a living.
Can you tell us a little bit about, like, what are some of the common traumas you see, or common, like, how would someone who's listening know, oh, that must be a trauma response, and you can actually heal that?
Well, like you were saying before, fight, flight, freeze, fawn, and then there's flop. Anywhere where your body starts to feel tense or even numb or unsafe, and you behave in a way that you normally wouldn't. So any place where you feel constriction, or maybe you feel a sudden burst of anger or freezing or distractedness or disassociatedness, usually these are the places where people are having some sort of a trauma response. And it could be really subtle. There's a lot of high functioning people who are having trauma responses. So something like being overproductive constantly to the point where their bodies don't get to rest, that's actually a trauma response. That's a response to need to produce, need to do. And they don't realize it because it's actually really accepted in this culture. Like, oh, sure, you're an overachiever, that's okay. But people don't realize when it's to the detriment of your health, there's something actually else running. Or if someone is consistently finding themselves low energy or apathetic or freezing or just indifferent, that can also be a very normalized version of a freeze response. Or if someone's argumentative, constantly blaming or looking for something wrong, it's actually the system's way of trying to regulate itself. Mm-hmm. We're not just set in this way. There's so much more possible.
Yeah.
So I have a question for you to get into this work and be interested in this work. I presume it stemmed from your own experience with trauma that you were healing, maybe? Venturing a guess here.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Yeah, I think the most effective practitioners are ones who had to overcome their own nervous system responses. Yeah, when I was in college, I almost failed out because I had what later was diagnosed as ADHD responses, but what they really were was extreme performance anxiety, to the point where I couldn't remember what I was reading. I couldn't do anything to perform in front of everyone or under some sort of time conditions without feeling an extreme amount of fear and shame and like this like toxic kind of self-shaming and attack. And I didn't know that was, trauma wasn't as popular of a term when I was in college. It was in 1996 to 2000. So I just thought something was wrong with me. And every time I went to a therapist or I went to my parents, they just said, you just need to calm down. You just need to focus. And there was no solution. So it was after almost failing out and then barely scraping by. And then after I graduated, having a really hard time holding down jobs and wondering what was wrong with me and not having a solution, that I started discovering personal growth and healing on a bodily somatic level. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that was the origins of it.
We all love an origin story.
And can you tell us a little bit about like the actual procedure, or the like how do you know you have trauma in your body?
If you're not feeling, there's a type of stress that's normal, where if you're about to do something scary, of course you're going to get stressed out. Of course you're going to feel that heightened excitement, right? But if you're if you know that your response is a little off or maybe a lot off from what's happening in front of you, that it doesn't make logical sense, there's likely something there elevating your heart rate, creating a shallowness of breath, or maybe creating an intense emotional reaction that doesn't seem relevant to what's going on. Excuse me, getting over a cold, so if you hear me cough. So for example, when I would go to speak in front of a classroom, my heart would start pounding really fast and my voice would start shaking. And I knew that there was something really off about that because it wasn't happening to every single person. I noticed some people looked shyer than others, but I couldn't talk without my voice wobbling, and I had trouble catching my breath. So that could be one way of knowing it. But if you have some sort of fear that you can't really pinpoint, like a fear of running out of money or a fear of being rejected that feels kind of intense in your body, you could be pretty sure that, something's going on that could use some love. I think most people, I haven't met anybody who doesn't have some form of trauma. I'm a trainer at Mindlight where we teach. It's the emotional healing company. And the way that we define trauma is a lot more general. We say that it's any energy that hasn't yet been integrated into the system that at some point was overwhelming to the individual. So for one person, it might not have been overwhelming, like a bee sting, but to another person, it might have freaked them out.
Yeah.
So, and if that every time you see a bee, you're still having that like really intense response, then you know you have something that's unintegrated. So anything that's still looping in the background, creating an arousal experience, or maybe there's the hypo arousal and then the depressed kind of numb, apathetic. That could all be something unintegrated.
And in your practice, it's not talk therapy. It's not. Is it? Or do you talk? Or talk to us about like what a session with you would be like.
We talk less. We talk way less because it's more about dropping into the body and really feeling. But I do need to know what they want to heal.
Sure.
And I also, by talking to them, I can hear how they're talking to themselves. If they're treating themselves with compassion, with kindness, because that's the first step of healing, is meeting the wound with a lot of kindness and acceptance. If we're coming in there red hot, like I need to get rid of this part of me, it's like the opposite, and it exacerbates what's going on. So we talk a little bit just to get the lay of the land. What's creating what sensation in the body? What's the story around it? But then we do techniques of brain spotting, which is not to get too nerdy into it, but the brain is connected to your eyes. So when you find the right spot and you rest your eyes there, your brain starts processing and actually releasing the energy that's been pent up for possibly decades. And the people will go through a really cool response where they're almost going on a spiritual journey, where they're seeing their past and they're releasing somatically from the body something that's been held in there in the background for however long. So I'll check in with them repeatedly and just see, like, what are you feeling? How are you doing? And, usually there, you can see how they're responding to it. If there's some sort of protective strategy of maybe making their feelings wrong or whatever's going on, because everything we do is energy. So how we talk to ourselves, how we allow ourselves to feel what we believe, it's all energy. So what I'm essentially doing is helping them release and heal energy that's stuck in their body on their own by just holding that space for them in a really loving way. And of course, I'm always calling in the Holy Spirit and just asking what's needed at this time and just following them along.
It's so amazing, Cat. So glad you're here.
Thank you.
So I have a question. How important is it for the client to know where the trauma stems from, or can you work around it regardless?
You can work around it regardless. Even if they never remember, their body's communicating and showing them a response. So we can literally just kind of talk to an energy as an entity in itself, and just whatever's story is around it. Like, I need this to be safe. I need to be afraid to be safe. Whatever the story is, we can work with that and just gently bring in releasing and relaxing, and it can completely dissolve with them never knowing, ever.
Yeah, I asked that question because I've heard a lot about people talking through or going through therapy and saying that they've been re-traumatized by reliving the experience. So I think that's a good point, that you don't necessarily have to go back down memory lane and bring up the trauma again to still get the healing. So that's very good to know.
I love that you brought that up. And that's something at MindLink that they highlight a lot, which is you don't go red hot into the trauma. You could, if you kind of imagine it like a tree, you could start way back here and then just gently, the fear of working on it, the fear even having to think about it. You can work on that first. And it's all energy, right? So you're gently releasing energy that brings you back to safety. So you can stay on these outer rings for quite some time. So by the time you actually get even near the trauma, even if you never go in, you've already freed up and restored so much energy that the person feels way stronger even meeting it. It's like a completely different experience. So we could spend multiple sessions just even working on the fears around working on it, possibly.
Beautiful.
And I have heard too people say, well, I can't do that because I don't really know what happened to me. And so if I can't claim a story that happened, or if it wasn't bad enough, like something happened, but other people have had this huge trauma, so mine's not that bad, and then they avoid it. And so I love what you're saying, like even just the little stuff, just starting to like release that outer ring. I could see that. I mean, I can feel that in myself as you're talking about it. Like, oh God, I want that.
Yeah. And I love that you brought that up too, about how some people, if they don't have an origin story to it, how can they work on it? And, some stuff is inherited. If you've ever, heard of family constellations or inherited ancestral trauma, I mean, I know myself, I've worked through some physical reactions in the body that I think came from my parents who grew up in the middle of a war, in the middle of occupation, and that I've never experienced, but I had these fears in my own body, and I was still able to work through it. And they've done all these studies on I think they're little rats, and not like I condone animal studies, but there was a study done where they would shock these little rats and also spray the smell of cherry blossoms. And what they noticed was that their grandchildren, even though they had never had any shocks, never smelled cherry blossoms, when they sprayed the cherry blossoms, they saw that the heart rate of the little pups started accelerating and they started getting anxious and nervous. And it's the same thing with people. Like we carry on these reactions as adaptive safety strategies to protect us. So that's one thing right there. And then the danger of comparing your trauma to another person's trauma. I mean, I did that for so many years. I was like, oh yeah, my parents were fine because other kids have this too. Like it's okay to beat your kids and yell at them, but we didn't realize until much later. And I think nowadays, like we're starting to realize that, hey, that actually has children feel unsafe with their parents. Like now it's like becoming more of a known thing, but back then it was common. But though how much those things impact us. And I remember just hearing like, oh, it's not so bad because someone has it worse. And it's just invalidating the fact that your nervous system still feels terrified, still feels scared of messing up, and whatever the circumstances were, it all matters. So to validate the crap out of it.
Awesome.
Yeah, A Course in Miracles says there's no big or small. There's no degrees. So it's the same.
Absolutely.
Amanda, I saw you. Looked like you wanted to ask a question a couple of times.
I was waiting my turn. Trusting divine timing. The study that you were talking about, Kat, on Star Talk, Neil deGrasse Tyson had a scientist who is conducting that same study with shocking the mice little feet, and they used peppermint. And it is so interesting. Like it's 3 generations long. And we have talked here about healing generational trauma. So I'm so happy that we are, first of all, bringing it up, that we can heal trauma without actually having to get back into the story. I just love that.
Yeah.
So I wanted to make that comment. Like, I have heard that because it's going, that those studies are out there and it's like scientific proof about this stuff. And also, like, how does like the one mind play into this? Like, or, that's what I want to propose. How does that connection play into healing trauma?
A few different ways. Well, for one thing is, you know how we're all energy. There's all the science, all the things to back it up, right? There's no solidity, right? On a quantum level, we're just pure energy. So we're walking around. If you look at the Heart Math Institute, we have this field that radiates out all around us. And when we walk towards another person, we can feel them. So what I've noticed is if I walk up to another person, if I'm near them, anything that I get triggered by is not them doing something to me, but me feeling their field lights up anything that is similar in my field. So if I get activated by anyone, it's because I have it within me too, and it's activating the same. So people really are a mirror for what's going on within us. Every single thing that we perceive, that we are experiencing, is a symbol for what hasn't been integrated or worked out within us. So you could say that that's part of like how it's all a mirror, the oneness. But does that make sense? I just want to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely, it makes sense.
Yeah,
Although, like, I can hear people listening to this going, I don't know if I want to believe that, right?
Yeah.
You can hear the group society going, But but that's what we're talking about, right? That's what this podcast is all about, is tapping into that and noticing that. And I love the gentleness on which it sounds like you approach that. So makes sense.
Yeah. So anything we experience outside of us, the most effective way to bring healing, moving from fear to love, is by recognizing that whatever we're experiencing, even if someone is rejecting us or shaming us, we're doing it to ourselves internally with different parts of our consciousness. So if I have a person in my life do that to me, it's like, great, where am I doing that to myself? And where did I attract in the perception of that experience so that I could see that I'm doing that to myself? And when we go there, it actually heals like way faster. It gets to the root of an issue when we do that, that it's nothing is actually outside of us. It's all just happening right here. And then there's the movie projector. So that's one thing. Another thing is when we're actually in session, like I am not sitting here like healing someone magically, like, haha, like I have healed you, you're free now. It's like but because we are one, because of that, I can actually feel their field and they can feel mine. We can all feel each other's field. So the more you've integrated within yourself, the more you can see with clarity what's going on in another person's field. And this phenomenon has been, also documented all over the place. Remote healing, prayer, all the things, like why it works is because we're actually one. So when we can mirror back truth and what's really happening and hold that loving, compassionate energy, all of a sudden they're able to experience releasing and healing in themselves, and it's potent. But I think the thing that has healing be the most effective is realizing what's actually happening, which is one, it's happening within themselves, and two, there's a part of them that learned to pinch off their own energy. I guess another way to say it is there's a way that they're cutting themselves off from source on purpose because a part of their consciousness believes that it is the best thing for them to do. And they got that idea somewhere. Maybe it was inherited, maybe it was through reaction response, but they're actually pinching off their own connection to source in certain areas that's creating that supposed problem.
Do you find that your clients know that they're pinching off the energy, or is it a lot of it unconsciously being done?
It's all unconscious until we look at it together. Like I try not to sit there and tell them you're pinching yourself off. Like we slowly drop in together so that they can feel for themselves, because the more that they can actually track it and feel for themselves, the more they can then do it on their own. It just, we can all access it all right now. It's all trackable. It's just that most of us don't slow down enough to actually feel and perceive. And if we don't know what we're looking for, it's a blind spot. So through sessions, I'm also showing them how they can track themselves, and then they get really good at it. And then they start telling me where they're pinching themselves off. And a lot of times they just need some help getting clear, since it's more subjective for them versus me. So we do it together and we unravel, like, why does this part believe that it has to? Like, why does it believe that it's safer because it does this? And then we come to the answer together, and it releases by truth, just by bringing that perception. And we bring in forgiveness energy. Forgiveness energy is this super high frequency energy that as soon as we bring that forgiveness there, it starts to detach the pain body, and it starts dissolving right in front of both of us. It's pretty cool.
Cool. Yeah. So I just want to state the obvious here for a second, and correct me if I'm wrong, but when we talk about trauma, we're talking about something that is a physical phenomena, an emotional phenomena, a spiritual phenomena, and a mental, or process might be the better word. Like it's happening on all of these different levels. Is that correct to assume?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the approach that you're working with is that it addresses it on all the levels, but what level would you say that you're working at?
What level? Well, they're all connected. So did you have did you mean something specific by that, or?
Well, I mean, like when we do physical healing work, maybe it's exercise or diet or taking a pill. When we do emotional heal, you know what I mean? Like, is there like one that's more predominant in the practice that,
right.
or what would you say is like the shortcut to healing trauma, to cut through all of the layers and get to the heart of the matter?
Good question. I think so. Some of my clients who come to me aren't necessarily spiritual, but they're open. They're open-minded to it. So I just start off from the get-go, letting them know that we are all energy and that there is a spiritual foundation for the work we're about to do, but I don't harp on it in case that's not their personal mythology. So we just start with their awareness, just bringing their awareness to what's actually going on, to staying really present, and to listening, and to bringing in kindness and acceptance where there wasn't any, to bringing in forgiveness where there's any judgment. And so by using those words, those are energies, and that it is spiritual. But the degree to which I'll say anything about that depends on the person. And so we're just playing with their energy to bring as much expansion and a return home to their natural state as possible. So I guess you could say it's mostly with awareness and tracking what's the thoughts and feelings moving through the body.
So this is a lot of amazing work that you're doing, Kat. I am so grateful to be hearing about it. This is the first time I've met you. And I am really curious, given the work that you're doing, how do you keep yourself, like, I'm going to say cleaned up, you know, so that you're prepared and ready for your clients. And then after a session that you can, you know, if there's any residual that you've picked up from them, that you clean that up as well. I'm just really curious about that.
I meditate for about an hour to 2 hours a day. And I consider it, you know, a very important priority to be able to do this kind of work, to make sure that I'm in the right space. So every morning, every evening, and all day long, if I find my peace being disturbed, I'll do the technique on myself and I'll unravel it. If there's anything that's lingering from a session, it's not them, it's me. That means that there's something that they activated within me that I needed to see. So it's an opportunity for me to then do some more coming back to truth in myself.
Wow, so much self-responsibility. I love it. Wouldn't it be great if we lived in a world where everybody was as responsible as Kat is? Wow. That would be amazing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Would be wonderful.
Yeah.
And at the same time, we do live in that world, right? There's no getting out of it.
Yeah.
I can see how it definitely sounds like a lot of work at first, but it actually frees up so much energy. Like I could probably do 3 times more now today than I could 10 years ago, because there's, again, when your body's not in survival, there's just so much more energy. Your bandwidth keeps expanding. So I actually find it to be crucial for keeping my energy up.
Yeah. Well, could you is there any kind of quick, short practice that we could teach our listeners to do? Like if they don't have the money or the time or the motivation to book a session with some trauma healer, are there any practices that our listeners could take home with them?
Oh yeah, I think Byron Katie is one of the most easily accessible, actually palpable healing questions. She has the 4 questions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you could take any topic. So if you think about a topic that's bugging you, and I would pick a light one. Just maybe it's like you don't like traffic, and traffic just pisses you off. You could just slow down and just ask yourself, like, what am I believing about this? What am I resisting? What am I saying should or shouldn't be of myself, the situation, or others? And as soon as you tune into whatever that is, you ask the 4 questions. Is that absolutely true? Can I be absolutely sure that that's true? And you don't even really have to give yourself even that much time because your subconscious is super fast. It's 11 million bits of information per second. So you just ask and then chill and breathe. Then you could say, how do I react when I believe these thoughts? And who would I be without these thoughts if I couldn't believe these thoughts? You just take a nice deep belly breath and just breathe in forgiveness. I like imagining it as a bright, sparkly, golden energy, but I just breathe in forgiveness over this whole situation, myself, the other. And I remember that forgiveness isn't me doing something for someone else, it's dissolving the hallucination that anything ever happened to begin with that was wrong. And as you do that, you can feel a somatic shift. And you can just repeat it and do it as many times as you want, because certain experiences, they have a lot of layers to it, especially the bigger a trigger it is. It's like an onion, right? So you might have to do that. I've done that sometimes like 15 times, because another layer will pop up and then another layer. And I'll see how much this was actually touching on that I have in my identity as the quote unquote truth. And that's what's causing all the reactions. So if I do that repeatedly, I've actually done group sessions with people like this, and we've moved through some pretty significant deep triggers just by repeating this one thing over and over. So I would suggest that.
Yeah, repeat those questions again that you're asking, the 4 Byron Katie questions.
Yeah, I highly recommend her books too. Loving What Is, and another book that's amazing is I Need Your Love. Is That True? She's got a number of books where she goes through demos with people with really hard topics, like with addiction, with death, with all sorts of, with divorce, with all sorts of things. And she repeats these 4 questions. Is that absolutely true? Number 2, can I absolutely know that that's true? Number 3, how do I react when I believe these thoughts? And number 4, who would I be without these thoughts if I couldn't believe these thoughts? And you can Google it too. It's all over the internet.
And I really think, oh, sorry, Melissa, go ahead.
I was going to say, I've watched her YouTube videos, and it's really helpful to watch because then you see, you're like, oh, okay, I get it now. I see how it works.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Good.
I totally agree.
Getting in there to understand.
I really love the questions Cat offered as the prequel to the Byron Katie 4 questions too. Because sometimes, like when I'm triggered, I'm like, oh, I could do the Byron Katie questions, but I don't know where to begin. Like I'm just all in my feelings of anger or whatever the situation is. And that's like kind of how you get into it before you dip into the questions. So I really liked the setup that you offered.
What was the step above it, Morgan?
That's what I was going to say.
Kat, do you want to say them again?
Yeah.
Just ask you, what am I making wrong? What am I saying should or shouldn't be about myself, about the other? And you might find some really young thoughts in there, so it could be really juicy. Like this shouldn't be happening, or I always have this happen to me and it's wrong. Like you may not verbally be saying it, but there could be a feeling like that. And usually, the more to the root you get, the younger it is. So if you ask yourself that first, you can come up with what you need to question.
Younger meaning when you experienced, not necessarily like just happened, right?
Yeah, like if you tune into the feeling of a trigger, there's usually, you could feel like a tantrumy kind of feeling, or a feeling that just feels more innocent. Next time you're triggered.
I have her app, the work on the app, and it's
amazing.
It's super, super helpful. And you can keep journal in the app. You can answer the questions in the app. You can go back to it. I have some that I have done like 10 times on the same subject. I have to keep reminding myself, is this real? I wish I would have like remembered it from the first time, but it just keeps coming up.
I will say if it keeps coming up, there's usually a root that we didn't get to. And one of the main roots is the addiction to suffering. Yeah. So every single human on the planet has like this part of us that likes to recreate some sort of suffering. And that part, if questioned, it believes it needs it for some reason. Usually the reasons are something like, this is the best pleasure that is available to me in this situation. Because it usually began when it was really young. So it's usually like, if my parents yelling at me all the time, then the only pleasure I can get from this is feeling sorry for myself. It's usually something like that. So, but we don't remember that. And as we grew up, we just continue, hypothetically, because this is one of mine, is I would just keep feeling sorry for myself, playing sad songs and looking for reasons to feel sad, not knowing that I was running this from the past because this was my only comfort back then. And so when you get down to the root of it, that, oh, I'm purposely keeping this, then it can unravel faster. Yep. I don't know if that's helpful. But.
That is so helpful.
A really great example. Very
that
relatable.
Is a great example.
Yeah. And what about resistance?
If there's resistance, it's some sort of safety. Like there's, some part of us doesn't feel safe, so we just sit down and give that part of us a lot of love and a lot of space to tell us what's up. And also not forcing. Like if this part doesn't feel ready to do a thing or let go of a thing, that's okay. And usually it helps. You just make it right. Whatever's happening as resistance, you make it right. And then it will reveal a lot more. It will continue to arouse. I mean, some things just take time to deconstruct because they took years to put into place. And our system is brilliant. It just wants to help us survive in the best way it knows how, to fit in, to belong. So there's always some wisdom in there. It's just usually young and unconscious.
So just as a continuation from our episode last week, we talked about illness and healing and sickness in the body and all of that. Would you, and I could be totally off base, but is doing this trauma healing work in whatever form that one decides to approach it, is that a way to get to the root cause of some of these physical illnesses and diseases that people are walking around with?
I would say from experience, definitely some of them. I was talking to my mentor recently, and she was telling me that some people come into this world to purposely experience something that might not be treatable. So I can't say for everything, but I will just speak to what I have experienced, which is that I experienced some severe back pains after having my daughter, and I went to all the mainstream things, physical therapy, chiropractics, some non-mainstream things, yoga, all the things. And it wasn't until I started doing a lot of emotional, deep healing work around feeling unsupported that it started significantly healing. And when I went to a Joe Dispenza retreat, I would say that 60% of what was left healed spontaneously within a weekend. So there's something really to be said for healing and the intelligence of our bodies and what it represents, because our body is communicating with us, right? It's a channel of communication. So my back tremendously healed in the last year and a half based on emotional work and not physical work. A friend of mine had severe prostate inflammation and was on a catheter off and on for 3 years. And it wasn't until he also went to a Dispenza retreat, but before that, he already healed it by doing a lot of work on where he did the Louise Hay work, where he saw what his prostate was representing, and it said something about suppressing the masculine. And he had traumatic experiences where he felt suppressed by his father. So he started doing a lot of the forgiveness and healing work around that. And then slowly, within the span of 6 weeks of meditating and forgiving his father, his prostate reversed after doctors told him that he had no choice but to get surgery if he wanted to heal. 6 weeks, it completely reversed, and he hasn't had an issue since. And it's been a year and a half.
Wow.
So I do think that, our bodies are energy. We are doing things to our body, and we can release and heal and support it. I say also do the physical things, like if you do the yoga or whatever it is. And then there's some other things that I have no explanation for that maybe I'll know after I've left this world.
Very beautifully put. Thank you. Yeah, I love that answer because it gives room for all possibilities. I like that you said some people come into this life to experience the incurable diseases, and we don't know what it's for from this dimension that we're experiencing, from this limited view of the world.
The one thing I do know is that when we do any sort of emotional healing work, it frees up energy. So if anything, it still will increase resilience and bandwidth and capacity to return back to love more quickly from fear.
Beautiful.
Oh, that's pretty awesome, Kat.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Such great opportunities for people. Like back to like healing the mind, to heal your body and heal your heart, right? And to listen to yourself and be gentle with yourself and love yourself. I love that part of your work.
Yeah, it's all a relationship with ourselves, right? Because there's nothing really out there.
That's profound. Drop the mic. We're done. That's really amazing. Yeah, that's really what it boils down to. It really does. Yeah, so I feel like we're coming to the end of our episode, and I just wondered if there's any last final words of wisdom or questions for Kat that any of you have, Lemonettes, for her, or do you feel complete?
Complete.
I think one last thing I'll just say is, like, I love that this is a Course in Miracles group, because it has been when I started incorporating the teachings of A Course in Miracles about a year and a half ago, that's when my practice and my clients started healing so much faster. So I just love A Course in Miracles, and it's true. Everything is for the healing of our mind, and just to remember God. So that's it.
Yeah.
Mic drop.
Now that was a real mic drop.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, so we usually have a couple of pennies post-its. I just take some key statements that are during the podcast. And so the very first one that I think that is important to share is trauma is really, it's any energy that hasn't been integrated into the system. I really loved that definition that you worked with, Kat. I never thought of it that way. And so that was really beautiful. And then the first step to healing is to meet I can never read these, the wound with kindness and acceptance. I just really liked that too. And that our bodies really want to heal. They really do want to heal. And so, yeah, so that is a wrap for episode number 94. It's amazing how many episodes we've done now, Lemonettes. And thank you, Kat, for joining us. But I know after this episode, our listeners are going to want to reach out to you and to get to know more about how they can do the work that you present. And so I was wondering if you could just let them all know how to get in touch with you and what exciting things you're up to.
Yeah, my website is subconsciousalchemist.com. And I have a podcast coming out where I just share stories of healing and my experimentations with how to return back to love more quickly, back to miracles, by applying really practical things where spirit does meet trauma. And that podcast is called Pants Are an Illusion.
I love that. Awesome. Okay, so feel free to reach out to Kat at any time, anybody. So thank you for all joining us. Yeah, thank you, Kat. Really appreciate it. For joining us on our spiritual journey today. We appreciate any and all feedback from our listeners. So if there's something that you'd like us to add into our repertoire, please let us know. We would love to do that for you all. And you can reach us, or you can find us at our website, 5lemonslaughing.com. That's 5 spelled out, Five. And on all the podcast, blah, 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 all the podcast platforms. Oh, goodness me. Anyway, so thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah.
Bye-bye for now.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, y'all.